Welcome to episode number 6 of the Kansas City Suburbs Showdown. On this series, we answer the question of how the best suburbs in the area stack up against each other. In this series, it's a good one. We've got Prairie Village versus Leawood, Kansas. Both of these cities are undergoing a massive wave of redevelopment. So we're seeing a lot of high-end remodels throughout these cities, as well as teardowns and 7-figure homes going up in their place. And if you stick around until the end of this video, we're also going to discuss a massive controversy that's plaguing one of these cities and threatens to turn those really good home values on their head completely. Let's get started. Part number 1 is all about the location and also some of the shops that you'll find in Prairie Village and Leawood. So as you can tell on the map, they are kind of side by side, but the big exception is that Leawood goes very, very, very far south. Now, here is the deal. Prairie Village, because it doesn't go as far south, technically is a little bit more centrally located, but Leawood, specifically north and maybe the central parts of Leawood, are also very centrally located, meaning you can get to Kansas City, Missouri, maybe downtown or the plaza, if you see yourself going there quite a bit, very, very easily. Now, the big benefit of being in South Leawood as opposed to being in Prairie Village is that all of the development right now in Johnson County, it's basically concentrated in South Overland Park and South Leawood, which runs all the way out to 135th Street. So we'll talk about all of the development, the new home communities that you can find out there. There's a stark contrast between that part of Leawood and most parts of Prairie Village that are already built out. And it's only got one development remaining that's almost sold out. So there's not really more room for Prairie Village to be developed, just redeveloped. And we'll also talk about that at the end of this video as well. Now, of course, the second major difference is you can see how much bigger on the map Leawood is compared to Prairie Village. And while Leawood just has about 10,000 more residents currently, it's over double the size of Prairie Village, meaning Prairie Village is definitely not going to feel like hustle and bustle or super dense, but it's definitely more dense than Leawood. However, keep in mind, all of that development in South Leawood, it's an ongoing situation. It's constantly changing, and the population is going to keep going up as long as they keep building more places for people to live, and there are currently quite a few of them in those southern parts of Leawood. Now, as we get into a little bit more of the shops, one of the things that Prairie Village definitely has a huge advantage in is walkability. See, in Prairie Village, what makes it so popular is you've got the village shops and you've also got the Corinth shops at both different ends of the city. And if you live around that area, it means going to a ton of locally owned businesses, local chain stores, and walking just 5 to 10 minutes away, which is super convenient. And it's not something that you'll find throughout a lot of the suburbs in the Kansas City area. And that's because we're really car dependent here in Kansas City. And Leawood, well, if you do live near some of the shopping in the town center and places like that in Leawood, it's definitely a lot more car dependent the farther south that you go, because a lot of that is new development. And like we said, it's constantly evolving. So there's no shortage of shops in Leawood, given how big it is and how it runs alongside Overland Park. You've got plenty of places to go. For example, one of my favorites is Town Center. You've also got Park Place there. You've got so many places that you can possibly go to. Lots of boutique, upscale places that you can go shopping at. Very fun place to be. Now in Leawood, you definitely have a lot more shops than that, but one place that both of these share in common in close proximity is the Ward Parkway shop. See, Prairie Village is very close. Leawood, right up along state line, makes it very easy to go out there. A lot of people that live in these areas will be out there quite frequently because you've got a lot of different places to go. And it was recently remodeled. There have been several restaurants that have moved in over the last several years, and it's definitely a rejuvenated spot nowadays. Okay, never mind what I said. There's one more little shopping area that I totally forgot to mention, and that is along 95th Street. So as you can see on the map, we're pretty zoomed out. You've got Leawood to your right, and then basically Prairie Village ends at 95th Street. So as I zoom in, you can see we've got plenty of places to go. Meet Mitch Barbecue is one that I've heard has phenomenal reviews, and everybody seems to like it. You've got a couple places to go for ice cream. You've got Sarpino's, you've got a classic Starbucks, all kinds of stuff on both sides. There's a little theater in that Ranch Mart right there. Dewey's Pizza is another one that I've heard is very popular. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit because while both of the cities kind of share that shopping area, if you go west just a couple minutes, you've also got plenty more shops on this side as well. So as I zoom in, you can see you've got a couple other places. One is Sprouts, super popular, tons of people going in and out of there all the time. And then you've got the Big Biscuit, which is a very popular breakfast place around here. And this whole area is basically being redone and renovated as we speak. Now, TLDR, deciding between these two locations ultimately comes down to obviously what you're looking for. If you want something more walkable, most likely you're going to find that in Prairie Village. The big draw of Prairie Village in northern parts of Leawood is that it's centrally located, and it also falls in northeast Johnson County. Now, if you do want to be a little bit farther south and where all of the development is headed and near some of the upper scale shops like Town Center, Park Place, then being in central or southern Leawood might be for you, but that's the big divide. Do you want to be in northeast Johnson County, or are you okay being in central and south Johnson County? Part number 2 is all about the schools, and we're going to pick up where we left off on the location, because that divide between northeast Johnson County and being in the central and south parts of Johnson County is exactly what we're going to see reemerge here in the schools part. So everything north of 435, which means all of Prairie Village and the northern part of Leawood, are going to fall in the Shawnee Mission School District. And here's a map of what that looks like. It is one of the highest rated in the entire Kansas City area, the entire state of Kansas. And if you go south of 435, you're going to fall in the Blue Valley School District. Since only Leawood goes that far south, basically the two cities that are going to fall in that district are Overland Park and Leawood. And the big draw of the Blue Valley District is that it's rated in like the top 50 in the entire nation. So that's like the crown jewel. That's the name that a lot of people are familiar with. And if you're wanting to be in that school district, that's where you would probably end up being, is Overland Park or the central or southern parts of Leawood. Now, another big benefit of Leawood itself is that it runs all alongside state line. And while part of Prairie Village does as well, Leawood also runs alongside the opposite side of 3 private schools in Kansas City, Missouri. So you've got Barstow, you've got Rockhurst High School, and then you've got Scion. So those are all very highly rated, all very popular to go to. If you don't want to put your kids in public schools, those are ones that a lot of people end up at. Now, again, this is one that comes down to personal preference. So here are the ratings according to niche.com. Leawood happens to be number 1 for the place with the best public schools in the entire state of Kansas. And that's certainly not a knock on Prairie Village, because Prairie Village falls in some really good school boundaries within the Shawnee Mission School District. And it all comes down to what your children are looking for specifically. Part number 3 is all about the cost of living. Now, here's a map that'll show you kind of how they all stack up against each other. One of the most expensive places you can live in the entire country is Mission Hills. And Leawood happens to be a close second to Mission Hills. You'll see some crazy jaw-dropping homes in the city of Leawood, and I'll show you a couple in this video here in a minute. But you can see that Prairie Village, a little bit less pricey of a place to live in than Leawood, and this all comes down to the specific home you've got, the size of the lot you're looking at, and of course the specific neighborhood you fall in. So this hides a couple of the nuanced details that we're going to unpack in just a minute, but here's a chart that'll show the line-by-line breakdown of how they all stack up. So if you're a numbers person, this will put it in very visual terms for you. You can see that Leawood is quite a bit above the US average, and then you can see Prairie Village is definitely slightly above, but not quite at the par that Leawood's at. So you can see the biggest thing comes down to the housing costs. Everything else is pretty comparable. So let's go ahead and break down these really big differences that are kind of hidden by the data and all the graphs that I just showed you. Now, part number 4, all about the home prices. If you look at the typical home value in all of Johnson County, you're at about $412,000. So if you look at that $412 compared to Prairie Village, whose typical home value is $425,000, it doesn't look that too far off. However, it all depends on the type of home you buy, because I think that 400 number in Prairie Village is quite deceptive. A lot of those homes selling at that price range, specifically from like the upper 200s to the like upper 300s, are all homes for the most part that are going to be like basically gutted and remodeled, or they're going to be torn down. And we're going to go a little bit more into depth on that here in just a minute. If you look at the city of Leawood, the typical home value there, according to Zillow, you can see it's about $682,000. So why is there such a big difference in Leawood and not such a big difference in Prairie Village, even though there are like tons of 7-figure homes for sale on the market at all times in Prairie Village? Fundamentally, it comes down to 2 big differences. Number 1 is that northern Leawood and Prairie Village were developed around the same time, like in Prairie Village mainly in the 1950s, and then Leawood basically around the 1960s onward. But since Leawood has expanded south and south and south past 435, all of that new development commands a higher price because they're just newer homes. The second big difference is that in Leawood, you'll find a lot of estate-sized lots. So we're talking a third of an acre or bigger. Plenty of lots around Leawood that you'll find a full acre of land on. And as a result of that, as long as land's in a good location, larger lots are going to support a higher home value and a bigger home being built on them. So that's why you'll see some bigger homes in Leawood than you will in Prairie Village. And because of those big differences, we're going to break down Prairie Village and Leawood's housing market independent of one another because it's like comparing apples to oranges. So first up is Prairie Village. Right now, there's basically one last major development underway, and it's pretty much near its end. So Meadowbrook in 2016, it's a brand new development. You had commercial there, you've got twin villas, you've got a restaurant, and of course, you've got single family homes as well. And there are only a handful of those left, but that is one of the last places to be. It's beautiful. The homes are selling in the multi-millions of dollars. The park is always packed. That's like the happening area of town as everything's kind of spread south, and that's the last major source of development. So basically what we're seeing, two things. One, lots of teardowns. They've been happening for years. Basically, those older, smaller ranches that they just don't support a higher home value and the land itself is worth way more. Well, those get torn down. Big homes, like a couple of the ones that I'll show you right now, go up in their place. And these homes are, for the most part, selling at like 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. And some of the really high-end ones, if you can find a really good piece of land, like a third of an acre or bigger, you can even fetch something like a 1.5. Now, I also want to show you some examples of some older homes in Prairie Village. So I'll place some of those pictures, but really the problem with some of them is that they're just too small to support any added value like a high-end remodel, anything like that. A lot of them will have one-car garages, which is kind of a big hamstring, like a big kiss of death for adding value to a property, because at some point, those are homes that are inevitably going to have to be torn down because they just don't support or are not conducive to modern day living, which basically necessitates a car for each parent in the household. Now, one last thing about the infill teardown homes that you'll see in Prairie Village is that you won't find many 3-car garages. And if you do, it's because it's on a huge piece of land that's certainly an exception and very rare. Most of the time, you're going to find new homes with a 2-car garage. And that's because the width, like the frontage of the lots, are not big enough to support those 3-car garages that you'll find in new homes as you go farther and farther south in Johnson County. Now, as we move on to Leawood, one of the big differences right off the bat is that since the lots are larger, like we talked about, you will find some 3-car garages in newer homes that are in established neighborhoods. But the farther south you go, you'll notice all of the new development. So some big ones are Aventino, you've got the hills of Leawood, you've got Haltbrook. There are a lot of villas out in Leawood, and not just like $500,000-$600,000 villas. We're talking like $1.1, $1.2 million villas, which basically means all the maintenance is provided for you, so you don't have to deal with lawn care or anything like that. And while all of those new homes are being built out there, there are certainly homes that are being torn down and rebuilt in many different parts of Leawood, specifically North Leawood. So I'm going to play a couple of pictures just to give you an idea. These are like high-end homes. These are like top of the top, 1.7 and up. That's kind of what you can expect in the northern part of Leawood. Now, I also want to show you some examples of some older homes that you'll find in Leawood. So I'm going to show you a couple of the higher priced ones, like this one right here, which is priced at 1.8. You've got the all brick exterior. Now, the next one I'll show you also all brick. You've got the 2-car garage, $530,000. And then finally, the last one that I'll show you is that $3 million, just huge 1,300 square foot mansion that was built in 2008 on almost an acre of land. Now, last part of the video only pertains to Prairie Village, not Leawood, but it's a massive controversy that you have to know about. Basically, the Prairie Village City Council is considering and trying to rezone parts of the city from single-family parcels of land, meaning you can only have one home, one basically household living there, to multifamily, which opens the floodgates to a few different things like building an ADU or a tiny home in the backyard and then renting that out to people, or dividing parts of your land up. Maybe you've got a really big lot, you don't use parts of the backyard, maybe you sell that off and somebody comes along and builds a smaller home there. Well, imagine if that happened throughout the city. Imagine how much that changes the feel of a neighborhood, or how it impacts the property values. We know property values are tied to supply and demand. Well, what happens when the city council makes a rezoning decision that fundamentally upends the balance between supply and demand, and also causes an influx of renters into the area? We know that renters do not take as good of care of the properties. There are exceptions, but generally there's just less liability. So there's less incentive for those properties to be upheld as much as one that you own yourself, your primary residence. So this is a big debate. There's a lot of opposition. It's kind of stonewalling a lot of what the city council is trying to do. If you have any concern, if you want to learn more about this, I'll leave a link in the description below. If you want to share your opinion below, by all means. If you have other solutions to this crisis, I am all ears. It's something that you got to know before considering Prairie Village, because it is something that's being fought, but it is a possibility, and the city council is actively trying to do that. So there you have it, Prairie Village versus Leawood. This was a fun one because there's a lot of redevelopment in both of these cities, and they're both very highly valued because they're all in Northeast Johnson County, and specifically along state line if you're in Leawood. So if you enjoyed the video, let me know by hitting the like button below, subscribe for more videos about the Kansas City real estate market, and of course, if you're interested in buying a home in the Johnson County area, this is what I specialize in. If you think we'd be a good fit, all my contact info is in the description below. Just give me a call, text, or email. We can set up a time to talk and create a concrete plan to get you a really good home, a good deal on it, in a phenomenal neighborhood. Thanks for watching the video. I'll see you on the next one.